Achieving a gorgeous grin from home isn't a total mystery with Bite Clear aligners. Just don't be surprised if all of your sleuthing friends start asking, "What's your secret?" Begin by ordering your at-home impression kit today for only $14.95. Bite Clear aligners are doctor-directed and delivered to your door. Treatment costs thousands less than braces. Plus, they offer flexible financing, accept eligible insurance, and you can pay with your HSA FSA. Get 80% off your impression kit when you use code WONDERY at Byte.com. That's BYTE.com. Start your confidence journey today with Byte.
And welcome back to Scarred for Life, the podcast where we open up old wounds by looking back at the films that scared us as kids. I'm Terry.
And I'm Mary Beth.
And each episode, our special guest brings with them a movie that traumatized them as a child.
This week, our guest is writer-director Erlingur Thoroddsen. He wrote and directed Riff. He wrote the Into the Dark episode Midnight Kiss, directed by former guest and very good friend of the show, Carter Smith. And his latest film is The Piper, which is out now on VOD. Welcome to the show! And like we were talking about, this is a synchronicity episode because Terry and I wanted you on the show and not a day later you DM'd me about it. So I need everyone to know that this is a very funny episode just from that context.
Thank you very much for having me. Yeah, I mean, like we were saying, it was meant to be. So I'm excited to be on the show.
We're really excited to have you because it's like... I've been wanting to get you on the show, and then when it's like I knew The Piper was coming out, and so I was like, okay, when The Piper is going to come, we need to get him on the show, and then here we go. So, can you tell our listeners a little bit about The Piper, and in case they're not familiar with it?
Yeah, sure. So, The Piper is it's a horror film that I made. I started writing it it feels like forever ago. I think the first draft was written in 2017. It was like around the same time as Rift. Rift had just come out, and I was kind of taking the move, trying out living in Los Angeles, trying to see if the whole, filmmaking thing was going to work out. And that script, the first draft was 2017, but then, I did a lot of rewrites, and it wasn't really until like early 2020 that, it was in a pretty good shape and we started sending it out. And that's also, as you know, the same year as COVID happened. So it was pretty dramatic, but the script was already in the hands of a bunch of cool people. And I think it was the summer of 2020. I had a meeting with Millennium Media, which is the studio that ended up doing the film, and really hit it off with them. They really liked the idea, and they wanted to do something relatively small, small scale, because of COVID, and they felt like the project really kind of fit that parameter. Even though I think, in retrospect, I don't think it was. It's not a very small film, actually. So
no,
we did run into a bunch of kind of issues with COVID and all of that stuff. So a year later, I was in Sofia shooting it. It kind of came out of all the projects that I worked on, maybe with the exception of Midnight Kiss. This was something it kind of just happened. Everything happened really smoothly and easily and quickly, which is not how things usually work in this industry.
I was going to say, no.
Right.
No.
So that's kind of the how it all came to be, I guess.
So what's the what is the plot behind The Piper?
Yeah, so it's a story about a young woman called Mel. She's a flautist at a symphony orchestra, and she's also a composer. And she kind of gets the chance to finish an infamous concerto that her mentor had written decades ago. And her mentor has now died under mysterious circumstances. And as Mel begins to work on and kind of try to finish this concerto, she quickly realizes that there's something evil embedded inside of the melody. As the title may imply, it all kind of connects to the Pied Piper of Hamelin. And, my kind of the kernel of the idea originally was, okay, if the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who lured all these children away by playing his flute, if that, actually happened, what would happen when a full-blown symphony orchestra plays the same melody? So that was the, what got me to start writing it. And
what a cool idea too.
Yeah.
Like I feel like no one would ever think that's not true, but I don't know. It's like you take this piece of folklore, urban legend, however we want to define the Pied Piper, and put it into like a much larger context, which I think is so interesting. I feel like people always want to try to interpret folklore in interesting ways, and it's cool to see how you interpreted this piece of folklore into something in a contemporary context. Like, yeah, it's really interesting how you came to that. Like, why the Pied Piper? Like, what kind of inspired you to use him as your central figure?
It was really just like I had been familiar with the fairy tale since, for a long time. I think, probably when I was a kid, I heard it and, didn't really think much of it. And then I was in Germany, actually, like, doing festivals and stuff with Rift. And for some reason, I kind of, went on a Wikipedia deep dive, at my hotel room one night and just kind of read the fairy tale again. And realized it's actually quite a disturbing, weird little fairy tale.
Yeah.
It led me to kind of do some research into it. And I found out that apparently in 1283, all the children in Hamelin did disappear overnight, and nobody really knows what happened. And the fairy tale kind of was born out of that event.
Oh, shit, really?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I mean, this is what Wikipedia tells me. I don't know how accurate it all is. But it felt like, okay, that's interesting. I'll buy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's kind of what got me thinking, like, okay, if something actually did happen, and if this melody, that the Piper played was a real thing, what next? So, yeah.
That's so cool. So music is so important to this movie, and I have to give a shout out because Christopher Young shows up on this podcast so many times in movies that have scarred people, and he is sort of like he's sort of like a folk figure to me because of how much his music has like permeated my life. So I just got to ask, what was it like working with him on this film?
It was like unbelievable. He is such a cool guy. He's so talented, so great at what he does, but also such a genuinely awesome human being. He was, at the top of, I've been a fan of his since a long, long time ago. I still am, but when I was a teenager, I was a huge film score nerd, and I have,
me too.
Tons of CDs of like scores from all these films. And so he was top of my mind when it came to looking for composers. But I didn't really, I didn't know him. I had no connection to him. So I didn't really think it was going to work out. But I suggested him to my producers, and they were like, hey, we've been talking to him about doing this other film we're producing. Maybe, since we're already talking with him, maybe we'll just like send him the script and see what he thinks. And he got so interested in the whole concept of the film. And, I think for a composer, when you get a script that's all about music really, and where like you have to create this centerpiece, basically, that is the engine for the whole film, I think he got super excited about it. And then, working with him, trying to figure out, what the music sounded like and all that stuff. It was really a joy. I think, I'm proud of many, many things in this film, but I think the collaboration with him is something I still kind of can't believe that we did all that. He did all that. It's pretty awesome.
Are you are you a musician yourself?
I'm not. I listen to a lot of music, but my dad is a jazz guitarist. And he's a pretty, he's a pretty big name here in Iceland. I guess as big a name in jazz music as you can be, but so I grew up with a lot of music, and
cool.
Yeah. So I feel like even though I don't play anything myself, I kind of, there's a little bit of a musicality to me, I think.
Absolutely.
I like to think.
Oh, absolutely. That's awesome.
I love that you kind of grew up listening to film scores, because that was particularly like in the 90s when I was like becoming a teenager. I, for a long time, listened almost extensively just to movie soundtracks. And when new ones came out, I would go to the store and I'd buy them like everyone else is buying like pop, CDs. It's like, And the 90s was such a perfect time for that. And I'm really excited to see horror movies continuing the tradition of having like good composers, because I feel like the art of composing in mainstream movies or big movies, the big blockbuster movies, where they used to be so big and so important, we don't see that anymore. And so I love that horror movies are kind of continuing that tradition for me, because I'm like, this is something I would have bought as a teenager to listen to in my car as I'm driving around, rocking out.
Terry, I love you so much. I just love hearing about you as a teenager rocking out to like the Hellraiser soundtrack in your car, like driving to school or like band practice. You were just like fucking cranking it up and just like, yeah, it's a great image in my head. I like it a lot.
Yeah, but it's totally true. Like, I think, you know, it has a lot to do with budget. I think budgets have been decreasing, and, you know, budgets have, you know, they've gone high in the, you know, the very expensive movies, but they keep decreasing in the kind of, you know, the space that I'm working in. And so most of the time you can't afford an orchestra or even musicians. Yeah. So most scores are electronic. I mean, thankfully, electronic music, like, you can make things sound like a full orchestra, even if you don't have any instruments. But I agree. I totally agree. I think there's they not just added, like, they added like a richness and kind of a depth and like a scale to films that it's still in a few films every now and then, but kind of not as you know, common as it used to be.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I also have to ask, because it's so sad to see that, you know, Julian Sands has passed away. But what was it like? Because he's a legend in horror movies, and it's so funny to have both, like, Christopher Young, who for me is like, you know, a maestro in horror movie soundtracks, and you have Julian Sands, who again in the 90s was like, he was huge in my head. So what was it like working with him on this? Because he's really great as the conductor.
Yeah, I mean, he was great to work with. Really awesome person. I mean, I've told the story before, but, you know, when we had our first, you know, Zoom meeting, because I was already in Sofia and you know, and it was COVID and all of that stuff, but we had our kind of first chat on Zoom. And he had already read the script, and he was already kind of interested in the project. But he told me that the way that he likes to work and pick projects is basically based on, like, is this going to be an adventure? You know, am I going to be working with people that I, you know, love, you know, stories that I find interesting, places that I've never been, you know, all these things. And he really kind of, that's something that I kind of have really taken to heart since then, because it's so easy in this industry to kind of get caught up in the whole stress and, you know, the grind of it all. And just to kind of remember, like, you know, we're super lucky to be doing this, and, you know, and get to enjoy the adventure of it all. And, you know, him on set, like, he was, you know, we had a cast that was, you know, a lot of experienced actors, but also, you know, some children and some people that were kind of starting out. And he came in there with, like, you know, 30 plus years of experience. And he was so nice. He was so much fun. He was so generous with his time. And, you know, we would be shooting, you know, these kind of grueling 12-hour days. And then we'd go to dinner, you know, with him. And he would just kind of tell us stories about all the things. And I don't know, it's really, of course, I mean, it's super, super sad how, you know, what happened. But the memories that I have with him, and, you know, I was also lucky to get to see him a few times after we, you know, finished filming. And, you know, he's a person that really kind of had a big kind of effect on me, and how, you know, how I want to work in the future, and how I want to kind of conduct myself with other people. And, you know, just an amazing person. Really amazing guy.
It sounds like this film was like a really cool experience between working with him and getting to work with Christopher Young and getting to work with these people that are like big in horror and also newer. It sounds like a really cool just like experience for you as a filmmaker.
Totally. I mean, it was, I mean, all movies are, obviously, but this one especially sounds like just special. I don't know. And I had come from, you know, Rift had like a $40,000 budget, you know, with a 10-person crew, and then making this, which, you know, even though it wasn't like a super big budget movie, but you know, we had like a big crew. We were shooting on sets. We got to build sets, which I, never been able to do before.
I was gonna say, oh my God, what is that like? To get to build a set, that's so cool.
It's so cool. It was so surreal, like getting to like walk through the set that somebody had built for this film. Just being like, okay, this is awesome. This is like a dream come true. Yes, I mean, it was in so many ways such a awesome project and such a awesome experience, and also just being in Sofia. And also the whole thing with COVID, like it was such a weird time anyway. Like looking back at that time, it was such a surreal 2 years. I don't know. I mean, but that's the thing. That's like, it was such an adventure. And now the movie is out, and that's, awesome. But just having lived through it and done it and met all these cool people, I mean, that's really what stands out for me.
Yeah. Before we get to your horror history, I do want to bring up, because you mentioned that you had an increased budget on this one, and there is a moment of pure grotesquerie with the practical effect that I'm going to tease but not spoil. And I'm just curious how like that bit of body horror kind of came about in terms of like the practical effects, because it's great. It was very unexpected and I loved it.
I assume you're talking about like somebody getting how to say it without spoiling it. I think we're talking about the same thing. Like at the end of the big concerto thing in the third act. I mean, yeah, it was something that had been in the script since the beginning. I'd never really worked with special effects like VFX before. I'd done some practical stuff. So I had to rely a lot on the people that knew more about that stuff than I did. But it was a combination of, some makeup effects and, some digital cleanups and compositions and stuff like that. But I don't know, it felt like the feeling that I wanted to get through with this movie was, not like an 80s throwback type of thing, but something that felt like you could have watched, in the 80s or in the early 90s, that kind of felt a little, epic and grand, but was still modern. I don't know. It's like a weird, like I had a very specific tone in mind for this film that is, tricky to describe, but I felt like somebody kind of ripping through the body of another person felt very at home. A little bit of body horror in a film like this. And it also just made sense with the climax of the music. Like you climax with the music, and then you have to have something like visual to kind of go hand in hand with that.
So let's go back to the beginning. When you were younger, how did you get introduced to the horror genre?
Yeah, I've always been, since I remember, I've always been fascinated and interested in horror films. Like 6 and 7 years old. I would be, I'm a kid of the VHS era, like the video store days. So I would always go to the video store with, my mom or my dad, and I would just kind of go directly to the horror section and just look at the covers and read the descriptions in the back. And I wasn't really allowed to watch the movies, but I was like filling in the blanks myself. Like for so many of those titles, I had such a vivid idea of what those films were. So when I saw them finally, like years later, I was like, oh, okay, that's how it actually is. It's not quite what I had in mind, but
sometimes they're not as good as what you've created in your mind.
A lot of the time, they're not as good.
Exactly. But my mom also, she would sometimes tell me the plot. I remember her telling me like about scenes from The Omen and from Carrie, because she had been in her youth, she had been, a fan of horror films. So, but, she wouldn't let me watch them, but she would, tell me what happened, which I don't know which is better actually. But and then I would my first kind of, I was really fascinated with Freddy Krueger. I would go to school and tell my other 7, 8-year-old friends stories about Freddy Krueger, even though I hadn't even seen the movies, but I was just so fascinated with the look, the iconic look of that character. And then I don't know. Then I just kept going. I still feel like a kid. all these years later, I'm still I still love the same movies. I still have the same outlook on films. Nothing's changed really.
So, were you easily scared as a kid?
Oh yeah, I still am.
Oh hell yeah, that's
Okay.
awesome!
Yeah.
Oh, that's so
great.
good. That's awesome.
I like I get scared of the dark a lot.
Hell yeah.
I was very scared as a kid. I mean, we'll get into it later with the film that I picked, but that was something that traumatized me for a long time, and then I used it to traumatize others. I've always wanted to share these experiences with a lot of my friends are not into horror at all, but I've made them sit through many things that they probably wish that they hadn't.
Yeah. Well, what was like the first horror movie you remember seeing?
So the first thing that I remember seeing, I guess it's like, on the line of horror and action, but Aliens, the James Cameron Aliens. I think I must have been like 7 or 8 or something like that. And I just remember like it was playing on TV, and they had been playing the trailers for it. And I was, I had seen them, and I begged my parents to, you have to let me see this. You have to let me watch this. And they did. And I watched it with them and with my uncle, like on a Friday night or something. And that was, I think, that was what kind of locked it in. Like I was terrified the whole time, but it was a feeling that I wanted more of.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
So you saw Aliens before seeing the first one?
Yes. I didn't see the first one until like, I don't know, 5 years later or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's great. I think Aliens is a great movie to introduce people to horror because it has some action, it has humor, and then it has some really terrifying moments in it. So I think it's a good gateway movie, honestly.
Totally. And it has a kid. And I think that's, I think when there's like a kid in a film, when you're a kid yourself, like that really heightens everything for you because you automatically just kind of lock into that character and really relate to them. But yeah, I totally agree. Aliens, was for a very long time, my favorite movie. Now these days, I think I kind of prefer Alien, but I still have a very, very fond spot for Aliens.
Depends on the day for me. It's one of those things. It's like those movies are just neck and neck for me. So I get that.
Yeah. Depends on the vibes you're looking for on the day.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
I'm also curious, since you're still like get easily scared now, which is amazing. What is the last film that like really got under your skin? Like a recent movie that got under your skin?
I think what recently got under my skin, the first thing that came to mind is Hereditary.
Hell yeah.
That really, like the tone, the mood in that movie is just very, it's like, it's not the kind of film that I'm like, afterwards I get, scared somebody's going to be in my house or something, but like the vibes are very kind of stick with you and don't leave. That's one. What else?
Okay.
I'm blanking.
The movie comes up a lot on this podcast. Yeah. And it's true. It's a movie that just gets under your skin for so many different reasons, and that's a powerful movie in terms of being terrified.
And I think I'd also like I hadn't been spoiled on anything when I saw it. Like I didn't really know much about it. I had no idea what the story was. I don't think I'd even seen the trailer. So I went into it super fresh, and it's full of surprises along the way. So I think that also it keeps kind of punching you again and again,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, before we talk about your pick, I do actually have a question, not necessarily related to your childhood, but like, what is the horror landscape like in Iceland? Like for like Iceland made, like obviously stuff from the States comes over, but like, what is the attitude about genre films in Iceland? Like overall,
it's very strange. They're not very big here. I mean, sometimes the the very the Conjuring films, stuff like that, like people will go see them, but there's not really a big audience, not big enough audience for kind of the smaller horror films, unfortunately, which is very weird because Iceland has so many like myths and folklore, like very creepy things that we grew up with.
Your landscape is alien looking, like a lot of the time in parts of Iceland. Like, and I know that they even filmed like True Detective Night Country in Iceland. Like, it's an incredibly beautiful place for scary stuff, I feel like.
Yeah.
So,
Totally.
very interesting.
And like, if you see a movie that takes place on an alien planet, like it's very likely they filmed it here, like Prometheus and Oblivion, all these things.
Yep.
Right? Interstellar.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, I sometimes feel like I'm on a one-man mission to kind of, create a horror culture here in Iceland. I mean, there are people, like we have this really cool horror film festival called Frostbiter that happens every year, but it's very small, and but it's a very dedicated group that goes there. But there's not. I mean, filmmakers. There are very, very few filmmakers here that want to make genre films. Basically, there are a few, but you can kind of count on maybe one hand, two hands the amount of actual horror films that have been made in Iceland by Icelandic filmmakers, which I think is, makes me a little sad. I would like to see more of that happen.
Absolutely.
Me too.
I'll keep making them as long as they let me do it. So
hell yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, but Erlingur, we've talked about your horror history, we've talked about the Piper, but what film did you bring with you today as your Scarred for Life pick?
Yes, so I brought In the Mouth of Madness, John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness, which is a film that, really did scar me for life.
All right, let me hit y'all with a quick plot description, and then we will jump into that story. So in the mouth of Madness, an insurance investigator, played by the incredible Sam Neill, begins discovering that the impact a horror writer's books have had on his fans is more than inspirational.
That's a good line at IMDb. I have to give him that. More than inspirational.
I'll give him that for once.
Sometimes you can't really count on them for selling a story, but I like that one. All right. So take us back, Erlinger. How old were you when you saw this film? What about this terrified you? Why is this your Scarred for Life pick?
Yes. So I must have been 11 years old. So it came out like 94, 95. So I must have 94. Been around 11 years old when I saw it. So by that time, I was already, I had started, I'd seen a few horror films.
Yeah.
But my parents didn't really kind of let me. I mean, it was like, every once in a while they would let me see something. But I could kind of count on being allowed to watch anything I wanted when I was at my grandparents' place, because they would just say like, oh, go to the video store and rent something. And most of the video stores in my neighborhood, they would, they didn't care how old you were. They would just give you, if you paid, they would give you the film.
Right.
So I went with my grandfather to the video store and we rented In the Mouth of Madness. And I was trying to think, I don't know if I feel like I must have been aware of the film before somehow. I'm not sure how I would have been, because I don't think it played in cinemas here. Maybe it did. The memories are a little fuzzy, but it was definitely my pick. And my grandfather was just like, whatever. And then we go home and we start watching it. And I'm watching it with him. And we get through maybe like 5 minutes or like 7 minutes. We get to basically the part where we're in the insane asylum and there's like this kind of flash, like kind of once we get into the proper story, there's like a kind of a montage, like a quick flash of images, horror images. And my grandma, who wasn't going to watch, she walks in at that moment, sees the flashes, and it's like an axe and blood and like monster makeup and stuff. And she becomes furious at my grandfather, like, why are you letting the child watch this? You can't let him watch this. And she starts like yelling at him and basically forces him to turn the movie off. But in those like first 5 minutes, like, the vibes are very, for me, like this movie is just pure vibes. And it's like the kind of atmosphere that I think only John Carpenter can really do and kind of get away with. So I was already terrified just, watching the stuff in the insane asylum and then those flashes. I don't know. It really kind of, they became so stuck in my mind. And I think because my grandma made us stop watching, it became kind of a holy grail film for me to, I need to finish this movie at some point, but also terrified. Like I didn't really want to put myself in the position to watch it, because I knew, if I was going to rent it, I would probably be, I wouldn't be able to do it with my parents. I would probably have to watch it alone. So it took a few years until I actually was able to kind of build up the courage to watch it again. This must have been like, I don't know, maybe 2 years later, 13, 14 or something like that. I rented, and at this point I had like my own TV in my bedroom, like a 14-inch TV, and this is still this is like still VHS days. So I rented, and I'm watching it, on my little TV. This time I made it through the whole film, but there's like the sequence when they're driving on the dark road and they see a person biking. And I don't know, at that time, that was like literally the scariest thing that I had ever seen. I just remember like sitting kind of frozen in my chair, and like I was so tense, and I was like gripping the armrests of my chair. And it was just such a viscerally, the feeling and the memory is so burnt into me that I feel like I don't even I didn't really kind of get a lot of the rest of the film. I was still so scarred just from having seen that. And then afterwards, I was like, I have to show this film to other people.
Oh my God. Sutter Cane got to you. Oh my
Sutter Cane got to me. Yeah, I had to spread the message. And I think, kind of fast forwarding like several years, I did show it. Like, this is, I'm like 20, 21. I'm living with my friend Baldwin, and I think I bought it on DVD by that time. And I'm like, okay, Baldwin, you have to see this movie. So we watch it like in our little apartment, and we get to that same scene, the whole thing on the road with a bike. And he became so mad at me for showing me this movie. Like, why are you showing me this? Like, he became so terrified. He still talks about it.
Oh,
and it's just like kind of brought me back to the whole thing with my grandma. I don't know. It was like people have been mad at me for watching this movie, and I don't know. It's. I think out of all the films that I've seen or shown to people, this is the film that has had the kind of biggest response from everybody. So that's why I wanted to pick it.
Wow.
That's amazing. This sounds like a foundational film for you in that regard. Because like I can imagine the very first time seeing it, and all you get is the asylum part and that brief flash of like, what the fuckery, with arms breaking in the window and axe and blood and monstrous visages. Like, that is, particularly for a kid, like it kind of reminds me of like the first time I would see like Freddy Krueger, and you would get into like the dream world, and it's like you can't understand exactly what's happening. I think Carpenter does a really good job with the surrealness of that moment, where it's just there's nothing to hold on to. And so as a kid, I can imagine that being very like stuck in your mind, especially if that's all you get to see and there's no payoff to it.
Exactly. It was, I think, even though I had seen some kind of horror films before that, it was the first time I'd seen something that had like these very specific horror images, like very kind of, and it has so many of them, because it's very interesting watching it now, because it's so meta and it's so self-aware, and it's kind of packing so much into this one story. But yeah, it's ripe for affecting unhardened young soul.
It really is. I kind of remember I did not see this movie until sometime in the last, I don't know, decade is probably the first time I saw it. But I will tell you that when I was going to the movie store and the video store, and I would see like I was the same way. I would go and I would look at the covers and come up with ideas in my head. And this one and his other film, I think, wasn't it his other film, The Prince of Darkness? Wasn't
Prince
that
of
Carpenter?
Darkness, like, because it's the Apocalypse trilogy is The Thing, Prince of Darkness, and then this is the last one, In the Mouth of Madness.
And I haven't seen Prince of Darkness to this day. I need to, but
those.
No, I haven't. But those posters, the Prince of Darkness one and In the Mouth of Madness, would always like stick in my head as a kid, and I would be like, what is this movie? It looks cursed. It looks like something that I should not be seeing, forbidden. And so like this movie, the poster has just like followed me in my head my entire adult life.
Yeah, because they both, like the original posters, both of them, they have these kind of faces that are a little like stretched or warped or
Stretch.
something.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well,
good.
and it's also very funny because you brought this up and I was like, oh yeah, I've never seen this. I'm so excited to finally get to watch it. Like, finally, I've seen this movie. I literally saw it for the first time 2 years ago. And I was like, I went up to my husband and I said, hey, I have to watch In the Mouth of Madness for the podcast. You want to watch it with me? He's like, yeah, didn't we just watch that like a couple of years ago? And I was like, no. He said, yeah, we did. I said, there's no way. I didn't watch that with you. I logged it in Letterboxd and said I loved it. And I remembered literally nothing about this movie. And I was like, this was 2 years ago. What happened? I was in the Mouth of Madness. Like, this movie
You got Sutter
somehow...
Caned.
I got
Yeah.
Sutter Cane. Like, I was watching it and I was like, see, I didn't remember. I knew the scenes. I knew like the pub, like his PR person, right? That was just his PR guy or his agent with the axe.
Agent, yeah.
Right.
His
Yeah,
agent
yeah,
with
yeah.
the axe. Like, I knew that scene. But then when the scene that you said, Erlinger, about the bikes and like when they're driving down the road, I was like, oh yes, I have seen this. This is a very David Lynch feeling moment of them
Right.
like
Yes.
in like Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive or even like the third season of Twin Peaks as she's just driving on a pitch black road and all you see are the lines through her headlights and a guy and then an older person riding the bike. I was like, oh, that's right. This is like a super like weird, surreal experience, like a noir kind of. And like, I love The Thing, obviously. Like, The Thing is my thing. And like John Carpenter, I forget, I think, how much of a range that he has as a director. You know what I mean? I think I like take for granted who he is as a director. And then I watch movies like this and I'm like, oh shit, wait, he's operating on so many different levels in his movies because he never really sticks to one subgenre of horror. And I don't think I fully have appreciated that until rewatching this and that like, there's like music that makes it feel like a noir drama. You know, you've got Sam Neill as the insurance investigator, it's always an insurance investigator or a private eye in like the noir movies. And then we have like a femme fatale character, you know, like the femme fatale character who I absolutely forgot was in this movie. I'm terrible. I was like, oh my God, there is a whole other like sidekick plot. Like he has a sidekick like in this who is a woman who is Kane's like works with Kane at the publishing company. And I forgot that this is a really fascinating cosmic horror noir that is very much like Lovecraftian, but also in Carpenter's own way. And I was really happy to rewatch it and just like be really stoked about just how weird this movie is. Like
so
fully
weird.
fully understanding like, oh, they go like full Beetlejuice. It feels like Beetlejuice to me when like they wake up and like go over that bridge and they're like all of a sudden in a sunny town. And I'm like, and then everything is like hyper bright and everything is just like in a very heightened sense of reality. And I was like, this movie really is quite complex from what I obviously didn't remember anything, but it's very layered and very fascinating about like our own obsessions with narratives and people and our own obsessions with like celebrity worship and like taking that to like an incredible level. And I think it's still very prescient today with celebrity worship and like, sorry everyone, but like you could make this about Taylor Swift and I would buy it. You know what I mean? Like
absolutely.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
I'm like half joking, half being serious, and that like you could make this movie today and adapt it about anyone, and like it would still feel incredibly relevant. And honestly, I would love to see a movie about like Taylor Swift fans becoming like scary monsters taking over the world because it's true. And I think Carpenter like really hits at that like core in this movie, and it's so impressive. And I can't believe I forgot every second of it.
So much happens in this movie. Like it's so, like you were saying, like
so much happens in this movie.
the breadth of like genres and like it kind of, and it feels, you know, watching it now, you know, the stuff you don't really get when you're a kid. It's like it feels like Carpenter is having so much fun, kind of doing the noir thing, and then doing the body horror thing, and then doing, you know, all these crazy things. It's like a comfort movie for me these days. Like I watch it like every 2 years. I just put it on and kind of fall into that world. And yeah, it's really awesome.
It's so funny, Mary Beth, that you talk about not remembering this movie, because I have seen this movie. I don't remember when I had seen it. It was sometime within the last maybe decade or so was the very first time I saw it. So when I sat down to watch it last night, I was trying to remember. I was like, what happens in this movie? And all I could remember is the femme fatale character, the night driving with the thing that we both all three of us have been talking about now, and the bus with the blue tint,
all right,
like the blue filter. That is all I remembered. And so I was like, I don't remember what this movie is. And so when we got to that initial asylum scene with the shots of monsters and stuff, I was like, there's monsters in this? I totally forgot. Like, I think I was Sutter Cane as well. Like, I don't remember anything about seeing this movie. It's so bizarre. And it's such a good movie.
It's so good. That makes me so happy that it's just like, this movie wipes our mind. Yep. Nope.
Right.
Yep.
I think maybe it might have something to do. I think, like, you know, the kind of second, maybe not the second half, but like the second act, it gets a little chaotic. It gets a little kind of, you know, maybe hard to, you know, it's, I think for me, like the first maybe 45 minutes and then the last 20 minutes are like perfect. And, you know, the stuff in between is like maybe not quite at the same quality, but I don't know. I still love it all. But I can see how it's hard to kind of keep the plot of this movie in your head because it kind of goes all over the place.
It really does. And it verges. I mean, it does feel like this whole experience of us talking about it feels like a cosmic horror experience where it's like, you know, it's like I have little bits and pieces of what happened, but I don't really remember it. And even I watched this last night and I'm trying to remember exactly what happened in like the second act. I have notes. I'm gonna have to go back to my notes and take a look at them. But like, it is a complete vibe movie. And I think that might be it as well, is that like, I'm just sitting there and I'm just enraptured in what is happening. And it's like, okay, now we have pulsating doors in a creepy cathedral, and Sutter Cane with his immaculate hair is like, you know, proselytizing.
When he just like the door opens and like his hair is like fluttering in the breeze the first time you see him. Like, of course, that's like the perfect Sutter Cane, like handsome, but kind of also nondescript, like kind of just like another white guy, but he still looks like he could have power. He looks like a cult leader, you know? It feels right.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. It's also fascinating to me, and I'm sure somebody has like written an essay about this, but like this film came out the same year as New Nightmare, and they're both these kind of super, super meta like looks from these, you know, big horror guys kind of, you know, examining themselves a little bit.
Yeah.
I just find it fascinating that, you know, Carpenter and Craven do these movies the same year, because
that is so interesting.
Am I wrong? Like, has anybody really made something kind of like those two films since that? I mean, I guess Scream, of course, but Scream is a little different.
Everyone talks about Scream, but it's not as like, it is definitely a meta horror film, but like it's not in the same way that these two films feel, if that makes sense, because like these are very specific. That is just more like about the slasher, whereas this is like them, as you said, kind of examining themselves as a horror director and influence, because I think horror influence in the 90s was such a big thing. We had like with like the ESRB for video games that was standing up because people were terrified of Mortal Kombat and Night Trap, like that kind of stuff. And we had moral outrage about violence in movies. And so it felt like when we look at New Nightmare and then what Wes Craven would do with Scream, investigating like horror as like a genre, and then we have this as well, investigating the idea of Stephen King and writers like him, because Stephen King, coming up at that time period, was looked at as a celebrity, and he had mass throngs of fans that would show up. Like
they make a funny joke about Stephen King too, right? Like at the beginning, they make like a little dig at Stephen King, like Stephen King could never make anything like this or something. Is that what he said? I can't remember exactly, but I love that.
Sutter Cane outsells all of them. Like, forget Stephen King. Sutter Cane outsells all of them. Yeah,
but like it is also so funny to watch this as someone who is in horror journalism, is a horror filmmaker, to watch like Sam Neill's character be like, what the fuck is this? Like, what is this horror shit? And I'm like, I don't know. It just, as someone who hears that so much, it's kind of endearing to see John Carpenter create that character, but like have him be like an interesting, like not just like totally shitting on horror, but like he's so outside of it. He has like no frame of reference, and he is just then thrown into the horrors of it all. But at the end, he's the character. Like he is like we're basically watching the film adaptation of the book. Right? Is that my correct interpretation here? Okay, just making sure. Because, again, Sutter Cane, I don't know if I even understand anymore. But it's so, like, we haven't seen a lot of movies like that, where, like, the character is like, I am a character. Like, the character realizing that they are a character and that they are literally a puppet to somebody else. Like, that does not happen a lot in movies. And to see John Carpenter be like, my puppet is realizing he is a puppet and he's having a mental breakdown in a literal movie theater watching it happen is just like a beautiful thing to me, I think. Just, I don't know. It's so fucked up and like devilish, but also an incredible awareness of like who, like the power you have as a director in a way that you don't think about it. And it's just like it's just really cool. Just I think technically it's like to see that unfold.
I think it's such a flex from Carpenter to end the movie with, you know, your main character watching your own movie like and laughing at it and like cut to credit. Like it's just so cool. It's such a
Carpenter's a kind of a curmudgeon now. He like goes to things and is like, I don't want to talk about it. And I love and like the vibes of that are in this a little bit. Just like, see, I do what I want. Like I don't
exactly.
Cosmic horror isn't supposed to make a lot of sense. And I like how he uses again, like cosmic horror is like used a lot, but also I think this is a really incredible example of how to do cosmic. Like if you want to go like full Lovecraft without being Lovecraft, like this is a perfect example of how to do it. Like we have the monsters, we have like weird dreamlike things happening. It's so balls to the wall that you're like, I don't understand what's happening. And that's the whole point. You're like, you're not really supposed to understand what's happening. And I love that, again, Carpenter leans into that. He's like, yeah, who the fuck knows what's going on? But that's the point. Like, that's why it's so scary, because you don't understand what's happening and you are just like a tiny cog in the cosmic chaos. Like, you don't understand. And a lot of films, I think, don't fully get that, but this really does hit, again, especially with the ending of, like, you are a cog in the cosmic machine and there is no escaping. And this film really hits that in, like, a really good, like, pretty easy for, like, audiences to kind of understand way, but also very effective in, you know, what it's saying.
One other thing that, like, I mean, I've seen this movie many times, but when I was watching it kind of in preparation for this, it's just how funny Sam Neill is. Like, he's such a, he's so good. And, like, also what an unsung, like, he's kind of like the male scream queen in a little way. Like, he's been in so many amazing horror films, and I don't feel like people talk about that enough.
He is my favorite like horror actor. He's so good in Possession. Have you seen Possession,
yes.
Erlingur?
I've seen Possession, yes.
Like, absolute crazy. Like, speaking about cosmic horror that really doesn't make any sense, like, Sam Neill, oh, incredible. He's in Event Horizon. He's in Jurassic Park. He is in my all-time favorite, Daybreakers, that nobody has seen. He plays a scary vampire. Like, he's such a good actor, period. But like when they tell him like, hey, just like be kind of nuts, he's like, okay. And he just like is so
he's
good
really
at
good
like,
at it.
Cause when I first saw Sam Neill as an actor, I saw him in Jurassic Park. And so I always thought he was like very serious, cause he's so like in that movie, he is a very serious character, but like seeing him being able to play and have fun and just like be crazy is so cool. Like, I want more Sam Neill. We need him in more horror things.
He can go from like unhinged to like the Jurassic like dad figure. Like, you know, I trust this man with, you know, everything that I have. And then like, you know, Event Horizon where he's just cuckoo bananas. Like, he has the range. The Omen Part 3 also. Like, I mean,
that's
right. Oh my God, I forgot he was in The Omen Part 3.
He's
Damien, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah.
he's Damien. I forgot it was Damien.
I totally
The
forgot
final
that.
confrontation.
He has such a twinkle in his eye, and I think that's like what makes
Yes.
it. There's like a even when he is being like very serious in like Jurassic Park, there's like a sense of mischievousness that's like right below the surface. And so when we get to see that sort of like on display in Possession as well, but in this movie in particular, where he just like has that wide-eyed look that like it almost verges into camp, but he is able to masterfully like straddle that line so well where it feels very real but also hyper real in a bizarre way. I don't even know if that made sense, but it is how I feel when I watch him. I'm like, this is both funny but also like feels very real.
Totally. He has this thing where like, I totally agree. He's always like on the verge of like going too far, but like just kind of he's right at the edge. He reins it in, and I think, and I feel like he's such a good match for Carpenter's style, because I mean he's not similar to Kurt Russell in any way, but they both have that thing where like they can go big and they can go small, and it kind of, I don't know. I guess they did work together. He's in the Memoirs of the Invisible Man, right? He's the cop, like the FBI guy, right? Sam Neill.
Is he real?
I don't
think I've actually seen that one.
I haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Yeah, 1992. Chevy Chase and Daryl Hannah. That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's the year after. Yeah. Okay, because Memoirs was 1992. Mouth of Madness was 1994.
Yeah.
God damn, his 1992 to like 1994. It was Memoirs of an Invisible Man, The Piano, Jurassic Park, and In the Mouth of Madness in like a 3-year time span. Yeah. And other stuff too, but that's the stuff I know.
A legend.
So watching this again, feeling like for the first time, even though I had seen it before, I'm always surprised that this is like a very Lovecraftian story, because when I see Sutter Cane, I think Stephen King, right? Like it's that it rolls off the tongue, even though Kane is spelled with the C. Like just the way it comes across as very Stephen King. And so I always thought growing up, and then also before watching it, that this was like a movie about Stephen King, although it's not. It's really a Lovecraft adaptation. And now that like I have a lot more of understanding of Lovecraft's work and like cosmic horror, I can see all the little plot bits that happen, like the idea of the man starting in an asylum and it being a flashback of trying to explain how he got here, and then the idea of like even the book titles in that Sutter Cane has written have very similar titles to H.P. Lovecraft titles. And I love that I love when cosmic horror is able to sort of reference the work that H.P. Lovecraft has done, but also sort of like get away from it because of, his very racist, xenophobic antics of as a writer.
Everything about that. Jesus.
But I love when people are able to take that and make it their own and honor the importance of his work in the horror genre, but also like sidestep his issues. And so I loved watching this and going, oh, this really is a feels like a cosmic horror story, just the way it's laid out. And I don't know, I love that. I love when movies do that.
Yeah, I think it's probably, even if it's an unofficial Lovecraft adaptation, I think it's probably, ranks among the best. And exactly because of what you're saying, because it's like, it's inspired by, and it's not like directly kind of, adapting it. And I guess you could say like, The Thing has these Lovecraftian elements to Prince of Darkness also, like, the Apocalypse trilogy is almost like an unofficial Lovecraft trilogy as well. All this cosmic stuff.
I need to watch Prince of Darkness, because that is one of his that I've never seen. I need to watch that one.
It's good. That's, yeah, go ahead.
It's more, that one is more in line, like, with the vibes of In the Mouth of Madness. Because, like, The Thing, to me, is, like, not like them at all in terms of what he's doing. But with these two, they're much more similar, kind of just in how gonzo they get. And, like, the scale gets, like, the cosmic scale of everything gets much bigger. Prince of Darkness is contained, though. It's like, it's actually pretty much single location horror. Instead of this one, it takes place mostly in an abandoned building, like a giant, I think it's a school, an old school. But yeah, it's much more kind of like in the more gonzo-y kind of, it goes like crazy places, but it's fun. It's just different. And there's a little bit of like found footage-y aspects to it that I find very good. It's like VHS
it's got
stuff,
like that
weird VHS tape stuff going on with it. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, like it's that video clip, like the transmission that they watch, like that feels like taken from like some nightmare that, you know, I feel like everybody's had, like a common nightmare or something that everybody's shared.
It absolutely is. Yeah, Terry, you'd like it. It's a good, like, it's creepy too. There's some good creepy stuff, and like again, really cool use of single location horror. With not like I don't want to imagine the budget was huge for this, but it wasn't that. Right. I don't think it was also like tiny either, like especially with some of the stuff that you see going on like in the basement level. But yeah, it's a good. That one's an even better companion piece to In the Mouth of Madness, I think, than The Thing. Yeah. Personally.
And Prince of Darkness also has a very memorable kind of scarred for life scene that I get, like, sometimes I don't remember like how I got into these situations, but there's a scene in that movie that involves a person and bugs. I don't want to spoil.
It's not spiders, right?
It's some kind of disgusting bugs. I don't know.
It's like roaches. It's Terry's Terry's deeply afraid of spiders, so I'm trying to prepare him for that. But I think it's roaches, or like, it's not spiders, Terry. Just so you know.
Okay, I can handle it if it's not spiders. Roaches, gross, but I'm here for it. If it was spiders, I'd be like, nope, I'm out, and I would be calling both of you angrily.
But that scene is like, that's pure nightmare, like, oof.
Yeah, it's nasty.
Yeah.
But so you mentioned the budget for that one, and I did find a very interesting quote, because like what I think I also appreciate about In the Mouth of Madness is the creature designs, because we don't get to see a lot of them, but when we do see them, it's really effective. And I did find a quote from Carpenter where he said that they had under $7 million to spend on the picture, and that it was tough because the monsters had to be outrageous Lovecraftian demons, but in H.P. Lovecraft's novels, they're always so horrible that they're beyond description, that they are too terrifying to see. So how do you visualize something like that? Well, very, very quickly. They also had to be slightly cartoonish, since Sam Neill spends most of the movie ridiculing horror, only to discover it's all too real. And so I love when I see that, I can see that on screen, because some of it is a little cartoonish, and they kind of pop up in places, but the design of it feels like something that we're not supposed to see. And I think that is what most people relate to with H.P. Lovecraft's work. Like, I'm thinking in particular, there's the moment where like there's tentacles coming under the door, and it's like, what is on the other end of that door? And I think moments like that show enough to like get your mind going, but not too much, is like perfect cosmic horror.
Exactly. But yeah, $7 million. That's I mean, I know it's 1994 money, but it's still, seems low.
Pretty surprising. It's one of those things where I'm like, wow, it's so awesome what people can do with like low budgets, and I'm like, but look at what we could do with even more budgets, guys. Please give us more money.
And I guess the other kind of, because we were talking about New Nightmare earlier, like this was also New Line Cinema that produced this.
Oh, it was, wasn't it?
Yeah. So I'm sure, like, you know, with all the, you know, Freddy Krueger movies and everything, they kind of they knew exactly how much they needed to spend to get, you know, the best thing out of it. You know, I think Carpenter's kind of, you know, working with those people, I think was probably in good hands. And it's Mike DeLuca who, you know, ended up becoming, you know, a huge Hollywood guy who wrote this and wrote Freddy's Dead: The Final Nightmare also.
They can't all be winners.
They can't all be winners.
No.
They can't.
That was my first. That was the first Nightmare film that I saw, and I also
was it really?
A fun spot. Yeah. Also, when I was way too young.
Well, and you probably liked it more when you were younger. You probably didn't have much of an idea of like, you didn't know any of the continuity. You were just like, I'm having a grand time. This guy seems like a hoot.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And the cool thing about that movie is like the end credits has like a kind of a best of like moments from the whole series.
Right.
They have like these clips. So yeah, it all worked for me. It just made me more interested in seeing the other films.
I really liked it as a kid. it's just revisiting it as an adult. It's like I appreciate
Especially
the Looney Tunes
after you
vibe.
watch the other movies, like right before it, you're like,
well, I went to Alamo did all the movies from one to not the remake, but from one to New Nightmare, and in one day it was like a marathon of that. And let me tell you, by the time we get to 5 and 6, it is like it's late at night, and you're like,
I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. Really quick, very side note, very small practical effects. But when the agent comes through the window and you see his eyes, like they're splitting.
They splitting.
Okay. Yeah.
They're so,
I just found a picture of this because it's very quick. But, like, I love how his eyes are, it looks like his eyes are splitting. So he's going to have, like, 2 irises and 2 pupils per eye. And it looks, because a lot of stuff in Lovecraft is, like, aquatic, it looks like an octopus eye. And I'm so into, like, these little moments that, like, they're not, like, this is a very quick moment, but that attention to detail and that attention to, like, transformation is what makes this movie, I think, so effective, too. Like, yeah, you only see his eyes for a split second, but you have, like, seeing his eyes and what his whole face, like, his close-up of his face looks like is so effective in conveying, like, Sutter Cane, whatever is going on, like, something is very wrong. Like, it's not just people mentally going crazy. Like, this is the first sign we see of, like, actual, like, biological genetic transformation. This isn't just people going crazy. Like, this is DNA being altered. And I think, again, I love the pacing of this movie in that you are just thrown into it. Like, we are mid-Cane, like, riots in the streets. And again, I love that because the world's unfolding behind us. We're not getting, like, full-on exposition dumps. We're hearing radio broadcasts and things like that and seeing glimpses. But again, we're really like, again, Carpenter's letting us occupy that world. So we're hearing about it, but it's not like this full on, like, see, bad things are happening. Instead, he makes sure, like, the writing makes sure to kind of highlight what's going on in the background without it taking over, like, the weird story at the center. And I love that because I think a lot of people struggle with that pacing about, like, how to give information without it being an exposition dump. And so many movies just do the exposition dump where you're like, you couldn't have thought of a better way. And this is such an I think this is a really great example for people to watch to see of how to portray information without it needing to be like, here's one person in a chair telling you what's happening. And I love that about this movie too. Like, especially as someone who is doing more filmmaking now, it's just like appreciating that skill and, like, taking that to heart about how to just make a good movie. It's cool.
And also kind of like a sidestep from that is just, watching it this time, I was just it just struck me how Carpenter, he's such a clean director. Like, he's so, like, he's not really kind of in your face with anything, but, like, everything looks amazing. Everything's so kind of, he always puts the camera in the right place and he always kind of cuts at the right moment. Like, going back to that, the whole sequence on the road in the dark, like, it's so simple, but it's so effective. Like, there's no kind of crazy camera moves or anything. It's just kind of like, cutting from, like, a wide to a point of view to a close, like, all that stuff is so well done. And there's so many moments in this film that are so beautifully directed that it's just, but it's all, like, invisible. Like, it doesn't draw attention to itself. And I feel like, I mean, not that Carpenter is, we all agree, and I think most people agree that he's, one of the greats, but I don't know, I still think he's, like, unsung as just on a visual level. The visual storytelling that he does is so good. It's just so, like, it's just like smiling watching it, like he knows what he's doing.
Yep.
I'm glad you bring that up because as I was watching the way in which, I mean, I think for all three of us, it's that night scene driving that just lingers in our head. And I think because he does not he does not tip his hand. He shows what's happening. And like you said, he's very invisible about the art of filmmaking with this, where I was thinking as you were talking, I was like, if this were remade today, there'd be some crazy camera angles moving around the car to show that like it's completely empty. And when she looks out and she sees that they're above the sky, and it's like there would have been some more, but he doesn't do that. He lets the scene talk for itself as opposed to getting a little too involved in what is happening on screen. And I think that it makes a much more, I think it lingers in your mind a bit more because it feels more real than the artifice of filmmaking can be sometimes.
Totally. I mean, there's like a beautiful shot, like it's an all-in-one shot. It's at the end of that sequence, like when they get out of the that bridge tunnel, and all of a sudden it's daytime. Yep. And there's like this shot through it's on the side of the car. It's like at the two of them in a two shot. And there's the sign of Hobbs End in the background. And it's all done just with focus pulls. And like, you pull from the sign to her, to him, and back to her. And it's so like, and it's so invisible. It's so cool and it's so simple, but it's, I don't know, like it's just awesome to watch it with, it's the stuff that you don't notice when you're, young watching it, but watching it today, it's like, he's got the juice.
He really does.
He's got the fucking juice. On that note, do we want to wrap up and give this our rating out of 5?
It sounds good.
All right, Terry, how many Sutter Canes out of 5 do you give In the Mouth of Madness?
I'm gonna give it 4 Sutter Canes. I think this movie is a lot of fun. I cannot wait to watch it again in a few years and not remember anything about it, because I do feel that there is some kind of like cursed thing about this film with me that is it's so wild and so cosmic in that regard. But I think, I think whenever people think of John Carpenter, we obviously think of The Thing, and we think of, that era of filmmaking. So when I see something in the 90s where he's, I don't think as well known outside of like people that are very focused on his career, it's always interesting to me to see like the things that pop up and to see him operating at such a high level in this film, being able to balance a very low budget with some great effects and tell a story that is still very cosmic and yet has like a through line to it that you can follow. And the music, he's composing music with this. I have to say, when this first started, I was like, wait, is this a Metallica song that's playing at the beginning? And it's not. He wanted to get Enter Sandman and couldn't. And so he made a song that was very similar to Metallica's feel. But I was watching like, is this a Metallica song?
Hold my beer. I'm going to make my own Metallica music.
I really thought it was a Metallica song. I was waiting to hear them come in because it with singing, because I was like, this is Metallica. It wasn't. But yeah, no, I think this is a blast of a movie, and Sam Neill is so great. So I'm gonna give it 4. What about you? 4 Sutter Canes. What about you, Mary Beth?
I'm also gonna give it 4. I'd seen it before, but I saw it for the first time. It felt like it last night. And I really do think this is a more underrated John Carpenter. I mean, like, it's John Carpenter, so it's hard to say, like, underrated John Carpenter. But again, like, I think this is one of the films that people talk about sometimes. But again, like, when you are a director who's made films like The Thing and Halloween and, like, Escape to New York, these kinds of films, like, slip under the radar because they're not as conventional. But I just think it should be talked about more, and, like, how he really figured out cosmic horror and how to do it in an effective but chaotic way that matches the energy of what Lovecraft was doing. And it's obviously not perfect, but Jesus, like, if it's not just a joy to watch Sam Neill be like a weird dude for an hour and a half and like run around Northeast America, wherever it is, just like figuring things out and getting scared by old ladies in buses and getting chased by monsters. It's just like, it's a joy to watch, and it's so much smarter than anyone gives it credit for, I feel like, so I have to give it 4. Erlingur, you have the final word. How many Sutter Canes out of 5 do you give In the Mouth of Madness?
Well, I am going to give it 5 Sutter Canes out of 5, even though
Makes sense.
I do see, there are some issues like in the kind of second act, but it's a film that has had such an effect on me since I was a kid. Like, it's a film that I I rewatch a lot. Any film that kind of keeps me coming back year after year, I think deserves like a Full House. I don't know if I would say, I mean, it is definitely in my top 5 Carpenters. It's maybe not my favorite, but it's definitely one of the ones that I revisit the most. From the vibes, from the cinematography, from, Sam Neill's unhinged performance, there's just so much good stuff in this movie. And if people haven't seen it, I think, anybody who is a fan of Carpenter will, I think, totally enjoy this movie, even if you're not a fan of Carpenter, because it's kind of an outlier, I think, a little bit in his filmography. It doesn't really feel like, I mean, I guess maybe it feels the most like a weird mix of Prince of Darkness and Big Trouble in Little China. Because it's because those two films are kind of epic, small scale epics in a way. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's good at that, isn't he? Small scale epics. I feel like John Carpenter is really good at small scale epics. But that's another episode.
That's another episode for sure.
That's a whole episode of conversation. At least one, if not 2.
Yes. And I just want to keep sharing I want to keep scaring people. There are moments in this film that will definitely scar people for life. So I think,
everyone watch out. When you meet Erlinger, he's going to make you watch In the Mouth of Madness.
Have you read Sutter Cane?
Have you read Sutter Cane?
All right, so here's what we're going to do. All 3 of us need to go to the same film festival and make them program this, and then we can do some weird activation about Sutter Cane, and we can do something. We'll figure it out. But I think we have to do this in the future.
Perfect. That would be fantastic.
I think so.
I think so, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us to talk about In the Mouth of Madness. Where can our listeners find you online? And the floor is yours to plug away with what you can share and talk about.
Well, I am still on Twitter, I guess. I don't really post much, and I probably shouldn't be there anymore. But I don't know. It's still it's still the place where I feel like I get a lot of recommendations and I get to see what's happening in the world.
Well, we connected. That's the hard thing.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
You connect with so many people. Everyone's still on Twitter, even if it sucks. It's that's where so many people are. It's hard, but I get what you mean.
So I am there. But like I say, I don't post a lot. I'm at Lingur, Lingur, which is just my name without the first 2 letters. I'm also on Instagram with the same handle. And I would just like to plug my film, The Piper, which is out this weekend, March 8th. It's in, a few theaters around the country. So if you are anywhere nearby a theater, go see it. It's got some amazing music, some amazing visuals, some, great performances by Julian Sands and Charlotte Hope and my wonderful cast. So, and it's also on VOD. You can rent it and buy it. So please do that. And all my other films are also fairly easily available if you look for them. So yeah, I think those are my plugs.
Cool. Well, listeners, you've heard from us, but we want to hear from you. Have you read Sutter Cane? What is your experience with In the Mouth of Madness? You can let us know by sending us an email at scarredforlifepodcast@gmail.com, or you can reach out to us on social media. I am at MB McAndrews on Twitter and at MB.McAndrews on Instagram.
And I'm at Gaily Dreadful everywhere.
And of course, you should be following the podcast on social media. We are at Scarred Podcast on Twitter and Blue Sky, and at Scarred for Life Podcast on Instagram.
And please don't forget to review, rate, and subscribe. And if you want to help support us, we do have a Patreon.
Also, we are nominated for a Rondo Award, everybody. Vote for us. So wild. Motherfuckers. Sorry, it's really exciting. I never thought I'd get nominated for a Rondo, and I'm like, this podcast is Terry and me's baby. So if y'all could vote for us in the Rondos and all of Dread Central, that would be awesome. Thanks. Anyway, thanks to Eric Bauer for our artwork. Thank you to Sean Keller for music. Thank you everyone for listening. Please stay safe out there, but most importantly, stay creepy.
And until next time.